Lydia Prime is a New Jersey-based horror author that teams up Lydia Prime is a New Jersey-based horror author that dreams up absurd, creepy, pointy-teethed monsters for all to enjoy. Over to you, Lydia.
Hey, I'm Lydia Prime. I'm going to be reading from my story, Hazel Hill, and From the Depths. To catch you up just a little bit, Una is the main character. She's just arrived to a halfway house run by Dan and Mira Sullivan. And after a pretty uncomfortable entrance and exchange with a couple of the housemates, the one host, Doug, interjects, trying to kind of call order and get like a house meeting going. So yeah, that's where we dive in. So to get started, as you've discovered, we have a new member joining us today. Una just finished a 3-month stay over at Mount Montgomery. We'd like you all to do your best to make her feel welcome. Doug placed his hands on his knees and leaned into the circle. Liana, that means not being a bitch. He winked. The boys erupted with laughter, and Liana, clearly offended, crossed her arms over her chest, turning her nose up at the lot of them. Let's go over the house rules, Mira slurred. Who wants to begin? Doug glared at her, the anger in his eyes obvious to everyone in the room. But no one said a thing. Una imagined that it must be hard to telepathically scold someone, but if looks could kill, Doug would be a murderer. Jeff, how about you? His features softened as he turned his attention to the boy on his left. Jeff, with a PH, nearly jumped out of his dark brown skin when Doug called on him. Una noticed a long, discolored scar on his neck as he straightened in his chair. She wondered if he'd lived on the street for as long as she had, or if it was just one of those things that happens when active addiction goes incredibly south. Yeah, all right, so gotta stay sober, no drugs, no alcohol, nada. Rando drug testing whenever they feel like it. He pointed to Mira and Doug. So you might as well stay clean, at least while you're here. Getting caught sucks. Everyone nodded in agreement. You get a printout each week of what house chores you're responsible for. Do them or don't, but you probably should because you don't want to get kicked. No fighting, no stealing, no breaking shit. Go to meetings or therapy, whatever brainwashing you prefer. There is actually a curfew, but whatever. It's better than being locked down entirely, right? Gotta be home by 10 p.m. If you're not, you're locked out and tested the next day anyway. So don't even try playing stupid games. You're the only one who loses in the end anyway. Doug thanked Jeff, and the room continued to discuss upcoming events, plans for the week, and when to have their schedules back to their respective hosts. Mira zoned out a quarter of the way through the meeting and started to drool on herself. Her arms were limp against her sides as she slumped back in the chair. Doug dismissed the group and excused Mira's behavior as being a little under the weather. No one believed him, but they chose not to question it. Una hopped out of the comfy seat and offered Doug some help. He declined in a much rougher voice than she'd heard him use so far. She felt a twinge of anxiety, but assumed it to be displaced aggression from whatever was happening with his wife. As Una walked past the couple, she felt a creeping sensation as it prickled against each of her vertebrae. Shivering, she hurried out to the main hall and patted herself down, unable to find her phone. It must have fallen into the chair I was sitting in. Una weighed the options, head to her room without her phone, and hopefully it might still be there later, or chance going back and dealing with whatever attitudes the Sullivans offered. She looked back and took note that the previously wide open doors had been closed. Maybe they left already? Una tiptoed to the door and gently laid her hand on the knob. The latch hadn't been secured properly, allowing it to push open. With fingers crossed, she leaned in to get a better look around. For a moment, she thought she saw Doug's eyes grow to 5 times their natural size and turn from a light brown to inky black. He towered over Mira, a strange red appendage extending from his chin. It glowed over her face, pulsing rhythmically, frozen to the spot. Una watched helplessly as the illuminated stem seemed to warp the structure of the woman's skull. In place of perfect cheekbones and a jawline that could cut diamonds, Mira's face had stretched, lengthening until it tapered out to an impossible opening. Her pristine velvety complexion was replaced by a slime-coated scaly texture. Doug, or whatever it was, scanned Mira's arms, exposing her thin, veiny flesh to his strange body lamp. Her hands no longer resembled anything Una could recognize. The digits had fused by the middle knuckles, and each had a dim, bulbous light on it. On the end, similar to that of her husband's. Mira stirred, exhaling a misty cloud that became ash as it fell. Doug let out an animalistic groan that made Una audibly gasp. He looked up, feeling as if he wasn't alone, but saw no one. Una dove behind a couch, covering her mouth as she tried to steady her breathing. She heard Doug take a few cautious steps in her direction and thought she could still see the vermilion orb glimmering overhead. The footsteps moved away, allowing Una to release her unconsciously clenched fists. Closing her eyes, she repeated her treatment-mandated mantra and stood up. There was Doug, lifting Mira over his shoulder. Both their faces were normal, no strange lights anywhere, let alone extending from their bodies. Una was confused, to say the least, but chalked it up to a defect of her mind. Back at Mount Montgomery, she'd learned that not everything she saw could be trusted, and that was part of what made her seek numbing agents. Dual diagnosis, the term they used for people like her. She was afflicted and addicted. She waited for the couple to pass before running up to her room. It was going to be a long 6 months. But yeah, I'm going to cut it off there because going any further would be a lot.